We are live.
Good morning, Madam Clerk. I'll have you confirm that we have quorum to proceed.
Through the chair, we do have quorum.
Perfect. And I guess I'm chairing. And can you confirm that the roll call has been taken?
Through the chair, roll has been taken.
And members of the committee, any declarations of pecuniary interest to declare? Seeing none. Members of the committee, any items you would like to separate for discussion purposes? As a reminder, the statutory hearing will be handled separately, automatically. Seeing none. Can I get a mover and a seconder to place all items for consideration and consent not separated for discussion purposes on the floor? Moved by Councillor Carpenter, seconded by Councillor Van Tilburg. Thank you. I'll now call the vote on all items not separated for discussion.
All items not separated for discussion carry a recorded vote of 3-0. Those voting in favor, Councillor Sokoli, Carpenter, and Van Tilburg.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. There is one public meeting on today's agenda. The public meeting is held in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. The purpose of the hearing is to discuss the planning application and to hear from the public either in support or against the application. At the end of the public meeting, the committee will pass a recommendation which will generally be considered for final decision at the next council meeting. The name of anyone who speaks in regards to any item will appear in the meeting minutes. Anyone wishing notice of further proceedings regarding the application should also provide their name and address to the clerk's office. And I think there's a sign-in sheet at the back of the room. We ask that members of the public in attendance today to speak to an item, make sure that you do sign in at the back. The applicant will speak first, followed by municipal staff, and then the public. Each will have up to 10 minutes to speak, inclusive of questions from the committee. The applicant will then have 5 minutes to provide clarification to any questions or issues raised during the meeting. As a reminder, the following rules of decorum as set forth in the city's procedural bylaws will apply. No person shall display any sign, banner, or place card in the meeting room other than meeting materials that, in the opinion of the chair, are legitimate audio-visual aids necessary in connection with any presentation to be made to the committee. All persons present shall use polite and respectful language and shall refrain from the use of language or the making of any gesture that is disrespectful or offensive. All persons addressing the committee shall speak only on the subject in debate, shall not speak to any other subject. No person shall applaud participants in debate or engage in conversations or behavior that may disrupt the proceedings of the meeting. Moving forward, I'll now call upon the applicant or agent to speak to the committee regarding your application. Please come forward to the delegates table. You know the drill. This isn't your first rodeo.
Thank you.
As a reminder, you'll have 10 minutes.
It's Bob Phillips from Cahoon Engineering. I'm representing David Winter, who's with me here tonight on an application at 816 Colburn Street East. There's a recommendation report in front of you requesting or recommending that a holding provision be put on the property. There are some outstanding transportation issues, and we would like the opportunity to try to address those issues because it may have an impact on the overall form of the development. So we don't see the purpose at this time to proceed with a holding provision. And as such, we would request the committee defer this application to a future meeting so that we can have further discussions and address and come back with a more fulsome proposal. That's all I have today.
Sounds good. And I see Councillor Carpenter has a question.
So Bob, you'd like an opportunity to defer this so you could come back with maybe a change in the application or a change in the design. Would that include any resident concerns that would have come up at this meeting that will be submitted, that will then be submitted to you, that you will look at as well?
We'll certainly go back through the notes, of the neighborhood meeting that we had held. You know, the transportation issues were, front and center at that meeting as well. And, you know, we don't know what the overall form of the development might be in addressing those concerns. So that's why we're requesting the deferral. So the simple answer is yes.
Okay, and permanently, the timelines that we're under with the provincial regulations will put you in a possibility to go to the OLT. Is that your intent to go to the OLT, or is it your intent to come back with a adjustment in the plan that meets the concerns of the neighborhood and staff?
Certainly, the goal is not to take this to the OLT. We're probably at the point we could have done that now, but we've chosen not to.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, you mentioned you needed some extra time. How many months would you need to complete this? Or weeks?
I would think one, maybe two cycles.
Okay. Thank you. And Counselor Slutz?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to be clear, once you've revised your submission, will there be another public meeting to share what's been revised with the neighborhood?
We certainly we'd be open to it if
I think it would be a good idea. There seem to be some concerns that I read in the background that perhaps you're addressing through this delay, and everybody walk away happy. Okay, appreciate it. Thanks, Bob.
Seeing no one else with questions, thank you very much. Have a seat. We'll move on to the staff presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now call upon city staff to present the application.
Good morning, through you, Madam Chair, members of Planning Committee. My name is Jeff Medeiros. I'm the Acting Manager of Development Planning with the City, and I'm here before you this morning to present the staff recommendation report for PZ 1124. That's 816 Colburn Street, and that is a Planning Act application to amend the city's zoning bylaws, and it's to allow for stacked townhouses with site-specific provisions. Just a bit of a context in terms of the subject lands on the north side of Colburn Street. It's sandwiched between two intersections at Hamilton Avenue and Locks Road, just shy of about an acre. If you put your attention to the aerial photo, it's adjacent to an established residential neighborhood, tends to be more on the single family, two-story type of products in the neighborhood. Along Colburn Street, it's an arterial road. It's where you see commercial uses in some higher densities. So with respect to the proposal and how we got here today, so initially the applicant was considering 36 units with supporting or with 30 spaces to support the development. Currently, or at least what the proposal stands today, they're proposing 33 units with a total of 35 spaces. The development hasn't really changed with the exception of the unit yields. It's still primarily two townhouse blocks. The property itself has smaller frontage, but a lot of depth, which is quite characteristic to some of the lots along Colburn Street in this area. With respect to the OP, so these lands and just for committee's information, so in 2021, the OP came into play. As is the case with a few of the city's arterial roads, these lands were redesignated to something called an intensification corridor. So this is very much the built form and density that the city has envisioned for this area. And it's quite consistent with other parts of the city as well. So from that perspective, the use is very much permitted. It does conform to the OP and it's consistent with the provincial policy statement. With respect to the zoning, so looking at bylaw 160-90, which was the original bylaw, so it's more indicative of the previous policy regime in the official plan. So it has residential zoning, primarily R1B, which allows for the single family homes. On the proposed zoning side, so it's under bylaw 160-90, it would be a site-specific R4A zone, which permits the use. And then with respect to the council approved bylaw 124-2024, it would be an IC zone, an intensification corridor zone. Really big difference between both for committee's information is in the new IC zone, the stacked townhouses are permitted. They're permitted as of right, whereas in the R4A zone, typically stacked townhouses had to go through some sort of zoning exercise. And then this application was submitted a number of months ago under the old bylaw. So in terms of some of the specific amendments, so one, it's to allow for the stacked townhouse use, and some of them deal with the standards of the property, so slight reduction on the lot width. And then these are some of the other design standards. So the side yard, that's a specific design standard with the product that they're proposing, so bringing the stacked townhouses closer to the westerly lot line. And then some other specifics, and a lot of these ones in particular are more tied to the unit yield. So that's a reduction in the amenity space, your lot area, and then your off-street parking requirement, which currently is proposed at 1.06 spaces per unit. So with respect to the development considerations, and I won't go into these too much detail, but they are summarized in the staff report. So just on the built form, very much a development that is in line with the city's urban design manual and policies. As I said, the built form is permitted here under the OP and would be under the new IC zone. With respect to parking, and parking is, can be a challenging sort of zoning provision that can be difficult to assess. However, the developer did submit a traffic impact study to support their development. The study itself did not have concerns with respect to the parking requirement of 0.06 spaces per unit. However, staff do have some concerns with it and are recommending the minimum of 1.25 spaces per unit. That's consistent with the city's new comprehensive zoning bylaw. There was a lot of work that went into that bylaw to arrive at that number. And typically looking at some other stacked townhouse projects in the city, we've seen variations in parking requirements, but they tend to not get lower than the 1.25 spaces per unit. A number of them have been approved at 1.5, which is actually the norm for block townhouses. And then the big piece is the access and the holding provision, which the applicant spoke to. So just to kind of summarize the access discussion, it's still an unresolved issue. I think that's pretty clear by the staff report. What the holding provision does, it allows the proposal to advance in light of the fact that there's still some constraints with the site. Staff are not quite satisfied with what's been proposed to date. There had been a number of meetings and discussions with the applicant regarding the access, but from a planning perspective, I feel that the holding provision does address some of those issues. It allows for some opportunity for potentially public input in the event that the city is in agreement of a functional design for immediate improvement. It does give that opportunity for perhaps additional public consultation, or at least an opportunity for the public to be advised that, hey, we're going to be putting potentially a median in the road allowance to facilitate this development. That being said, there may not be a solution at all for the median, and it could mean that they need to get an alternative access to the site. However, if committee is to proceed with the deferral, staff are agreeable to work with the applicant going forward. So in conclusion, as I said in my staff report, staff are recommending approval subject to the provisions that are identified in the report. What this would do is create some new housing opportunities. It's, as you can see from the air photo, it's a very underutilized site, and it does conform to the vision in the city's official plan. Thank you.
Any questions? Councillor Carpenter?
So if we were to defer this, it still is covered under the original application form, which requires the zoning application, right? Not the new.
Through you, Madam Chair, could you clarify that, Councillor
If
Carpenter?
we defer this application to come back 2 cycles and to deal with all the concerns that residents have and the concerns that staff have, it's still under the original application, which was under the old bylaw.
Correct. So this application was passed in advance of the bylaw. This would actually be the first amendment before council since the new comprehensive bylaw. But yeah, this was submitted well in advance of the new comprehensive bylaw being
So it's
approved.
still covered under all those regulations.
Correct.
That's what I want to be clarified. So if we get a deferral, the residents still could submit their concerns and with this development.
Correct. I mean, the public process would still stay open. I mean, there would still be opportunity for members of the public to provide written comments or even attend any future meetings if there were any.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Counselor McCreary?
Chair, thank you. What is the roadmap then to a recommendation and approval for this project?
Through you, Madam Chair. I mean, staff are presenting a recommendation to committee today. It's subject to a holding provision. If in the event that committee were to defer the application, what I would envision that the committee would stipulate some sort of cycle when they would want this matter to come back before the committee. Perhaps it's 2 or 3 cycles. I'll leave that up to committee. After this meeting, there would obviously need to be some sort of discussion with the applicant. I don't really know if there's going to be a resolution to the access at the end of the day. That being said, I mean, the access situation, and it's identified in the staff report, typically is not something that's approved under zoning, right? It's approved under another process called a site plan application. So there would still be opportunity for staff to vet that sort of design through that process. But I would imagine there would be a similar staff recommendation coming forward, and it's going to be dependent on what sort of solutions come forward in discussions that occur with the applicant.
So is that something that's currently underway, or is that something that's going to engender a second round of discussion?
That's a great question. There hasn't been any discussions. There was a meeting back in the summer with the applicant about the concept for the median design. It could very well generate discussion. So if it's a complete redesign to the site and or a complete change to what sort of improvements or infrastructure upgrades are proposed to the roadway, it could take some time to review that. But at the end of the day, staff may not accept it too. Correct.
Very good. Mayor Davis?
Yeah, through you, Chair. I want to make sure I fully understand this issue of the exit and egress from this lot, which I assume is it's the main problem, is it not? That the lot is too narrow and it's too close to Locks Road, the entrance. Is that the essence of it?
For you, Madam Chair, that's correct. It's close to Locks Road. It's also close to the Hamilton Avenue intersection.
Right. So the concern is that you would have traffic pulling out of from this development, wanting to cross Colburn Street to proceed east on Colburn Street, and doing that very close to 2 other intersections and 1 signalized intersection. That's the issue, right?
Through the chair, Gary Peever, Manager of Development Engineering. That is correct.
Yeah, okay. So what options are there to address that if the property remains in its current configuration? Is the median the only way to address that? And I take it the median is to prevent people from pulling out and crossing Colburn Street to go east.
Through the chair, the median itself proposal was to restrict access from this site. It would also restrict accesses of existing neighboring
Right.
properties as well.
Right.
Ultimately, in the current configuration, looking at a solution here, it would be either finding another access through other properties, neighboring properties, whether through an agreement, easement, or buying those properties. The other option that we've looked at would be, again, significantly less units. We looked at a number of approximately about 10 units or less, looking at what the traffic coming out. There's a driveway there today of 1 single family dwelling, but the kind of cutoff would be that 10 units. If it was a proposal of less than that, then we might be able to find a solution.
Okay, thank you.
And we've run out of time. There will be additional opportunity to ask staff questions during, while we're speaking to the discussion on this. So we'll now open the floor to members of the public seeking to speak to this item. If there are any members of the public attending virtually, just use the raise hand function at the bottom of the screen to indicate that you're looking to speak. Are there any members of the public in the chambers who would like to speak to this application? Just raise your hand. Come on up. And when you're called upon, you can come on up, have a seat at one of the tables up here. Yep, come on up. Before you begin, I'll ask you to just state your name and your address before beginning. You have to turn the microphone on first. And then you'll have 10 minutes to give a presentation, and that's inclusive of any questions we may have of you. There you go.
Okay. My name is Sandra Mellors and my property is 808 Colburn Street, which would abut to this property that is under consideration right now. Right now, the concerns that we have as homeowners and reflecting the neighborhood in general, many have been talked about today, some have been clarified. However, obviously, the parking is an issue. We do not have that issue at our property because we have no parking on Colburn Street. However, our neighbors who we have known for years and James Ave, Avondale, Hamilton, Locks Road, Chester Street, we foresee them all being used inappropriately, if you want to call it that way, to try to facilitate parking for these future residents. It would be logical to think that there would be many of the residents that would be moving in that have more than one car. So obviously, that's going to impact the surrounding parking. I think the biggest problem we have at this point is also the proposed median that is part of the possible solution to the access. It is my understanding that with that median, people will come out of that driveway and there will be no left turns. It's very logical when you put it into those words that there's going to be some impact on the flow of the traffic. Obviously, and likely, they will go to the right, possibly use any of the driveways on Colburn to turn around. I expect too that they'll go down to Smith's Drugstore, turn around in that parking lot, and then get their left-hand turn. Living there as long as I have, we moved in 1994. We're very well aware of the flow of traffic. We have a lot of trucks. What it happened this morning, which was very good for me to be able to speak of, where a truck was going down Locks Road, which happens many times a day, and they cannot navigate the corner at the Sherwood restaurant without going into the other lanes of traffic to give them enough room to either go from east down to Locks Road or west down to Locks Road, and that occurred today. So that is an ongoing issue. It's also a thoroughfare for a lot of emergency vehicles that come west, east. There's many emergency vehicles that are called into the Sherwood Motel frequently with some recurring problems that we have in that area. Also, for the unit itself that are going up, we do have a issue with height reflecting on the single family dwellings that are existing. We have questions as to lighting. Is there going to be light standards in the parking lot? That is going to reflect the current owners. In very basic terms, we have garbage removal. Will that be trucks coming in? Will the bins be there? Will there be noise from that, smells from that? We're going to have new neighbors, which is lovely, but they will have children and pets and people and visitors. There's 2 visitor parking spots, 2. So you have the parking for the residents, but you also have visitors. Everybody's going to have company coming and wanting to use this surrounding area for parking. Also, there was no mention that I read about handicap spots, which is a different issue. It's not necessarily about the neighbors. It's just a concern. As far as an alternative with possibly another property purchase or a different access, I did speak to Fred and, well, Trudy Schiller, who is the house that butts right up to the driveway of this property. I spoke to her this week. They're an elderly couple. He is very ill. They have no intention of moving. That would be a logical property to include to make it the access easier. I just wanted to speak on her behalf. She's very stressed out about it, and she has made it clear to the applicant that they have no intention of moving. So that is absolutely not an option. I just wanted to do that on her behalf. I think that I've pretty much hit on everything, and the information that I've acquired today also has a bit of clarification. I'm relieved that we're going to be deferred because there are a lot of issues still to be looked into in a general manner for the neighborhood itself. So those are my concerns, and thank you for giving me some time to talk.
Thank you so much for coming out. Just to confirm, your name was Sandra?
Yes,
Sandra.
and 808.
Sandra, I do believe we have one question for you from Counselor Carpenter.
Oh, okay.
Thanks for coming, Sandra. So you agree that this needs to be deferred so that those issues and the other issues identified by staff can be addressed in advance of coming forward again?
I totally agree because they are significant issues and impacting on the neighborhood and safety, traffic flow, very basic things that need to really be sorted out.
And kind of
Yes.
while I have you here, Sandra, the Coleman Street has been zoned as an intensification corridor, so to eliminate some of those motels and to allow intensification on Coleman Street, which is high-rise apartment buildings in the future. How did you feel about that?
Well, to be honest, being there since 1994, we have, we have the biggest parcel, have been approached multiple times. The one that made the most sense, and the only reason it didn't really, one of the reasons it didn't go was because there were 6 homeowners involved and nobody could really agree. And the developers, there was Van Elslander, Kevin,
That's okay, you don't gotta name the.
it doesn't matter. We've been approached many times. And the one that made the most sense was, more of single dwelling townhouses that were either attached or not attached that went through the back of all of those 6 properties. Access was figured out. There was drawings done, and it just never happened. And we've been approached many, many times by different developers because we do have the biggest piece. And there's been nothing yet that we feel fits with the neighborhood and makes a sense for any reason to move or sell.
Thank you for coming.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't see any other questions for you. Are there any other members of the public in chambers looking to speak to this item? Are there any other members of the public in the chambers looking to speak to this item? Madam Clerk, can you confirm we have nobody online looking to speak to this item?
Through the chair, that is correct. We do not have any virtual participants.
Okay, we will move forward with clarification statements. So if the applicant would like to come forward, if you would like to clarify on anything that was brought forward during the presentations, you'll have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Other than, we've heard all the comments and I think that is one of the reasons why we are seeking a deferral at this point.
Short and sweet, I like it. Thank you. All right, well, this concludes the public meeting. I'll officially close that, and I will need a mover and a seconder to place item 4.1 on the floor for discussion purposes. Moved by Counselor Carpenter, seconded by Counselor Sless. All right. Do we have to actually read this all out, Madam Chair?
I would recommend it be read.
Okay, Counselor Carpenter, if you wouldn't mind reading it all out.
Thank you. I'd like to move a deferral for 2 cycles for this item as was requested by the developer and by the residents, quite frankly, to work out the situation. So 2 cycles deferral, seeking a second.
Procedurally, Madam Clerk, do we need this on the floor before, like we have to?
We can move a deferral as a main motion before the.
Okay.
item to the floor.
All right, any discussion on the deferral 2 cycles? Counselor McCreary.
Just looking for clarity with respect to the timeline in which we have to render a decision on this application. Does a deferral of 2 cycles put us beyond that deadline and place us in jeopardy?
To Madam Chair and to the ward council, we are already beyond the statutory timelines on these applications.
Is there a reason why that is the case?
We want to, explore all opportunities with the applicant. As I said, there was a meeting back in August to find some sort of resolution to the road improvements. Nothing really unfortunately came out of that. And here we are today with a recommendation.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on the deferral? Seeing none, we'll call the vote.
The motion to defer item 4.1 carries on a recorded vote of 6-0. Those voting in favor, Counselor Sokoli, Celeste, McCreary, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, Mayor Davis.
All right, we have no presentations, no delegations, nothing was separated for further discussion, no notices of motion, and this meeting is now adjourned.